Take your marks.
You're listening to the Pullbuoy podcast.
International swimming is finally over with the conclusion of the European Swimming Championships in Rome. Steve here, this is the Pullbuoy podcast. Bob and Katie are on board. We're going to run the rule over what happened in Rome, look at some of the British swims and the other bits and bobs that occurred. Bob is still in Rome. Enjoyed your week there watching the swimming, Bob?
Very much, and it was great to be back here, 13 years after we were here for the World Championships. Not much has changed, but it was the same kind of layout, same structure, all the food courts and everything else. There was a lot going on behind the scenes with the swimming. It wasn't that well prepared in terms of getting the event on, I've got to be absolutely honest. It might have looked great front of house, and all the pictures were quite good for the most part, but there was a little lack of attention to detail behind the scenes, which you wouldn't have seen, but for those of us working on it, was quite evident from the start.
Well, it did look pretty good on TV, as you say, and there was some excellent swimming going on in the 4-0 Italico pool. We are going to mainly focus on the Brits, as we normally do, but before we do that, there's one swim, Katie, that we really got to talk about from David Popvici, who broke the world record for the 100 metres freestyle with a 46.86 swim in the final there. What did you make of that?
Yeah, pretty amazing. He's 17. He's not a big guy. He swims it so differently. I mean, I'd kind of liked, I don't know if anybody's done a mashup of the old world record sort of next to this, but I think they're very, very different swims. His back end is just blows my mind. He's incredible, and he's a showman. It's really fun to watch, and what a long summer for him. I think we've seen him at Worlds, European Juniors. We're seeing him here. He's going on to World Juniors. He's just having a massive year, and he doesn't seem to be getting tired.
Two things I should say, Steve. The turns are unbelievable. You look at his turns, and he gains, I don't know how much he gains, but there's a fair proportion of that swim. He just gets propulsion off the turns, and suddenly it's like a rocket. Comes off those turns so quickly. And like, for example, in that 100, he wasn't even leading at 50. He was second at 50. But when he comes off the turn, he's already about half a body to almost a body length clear. And there's something that he does. I'm sure the analysts will all be looking at that kind of stuff and trying to work it all out. But also I thought it was quite interesting that people are making quite a few comparisons with Michael Phelps at the same age. Same kind of body mass, relatively scrawny, not a lot of meat on him, and people saying, he is quite Phelps-like in lots of ways.
He definitely has a similar sort of physique, and you're right about his turns. His underwater work is exemplary, and his breakouts are just fantastic. And what's so impressive is he looks like he's pulling away from the field, but the reality is he's just not slowing down. He keeps his pace all the way through those second 50s, and everyone else is dropping off their pace, and his is just staying up there. And we saw that again in the 200 metres, where he became the first man in a textile suit to break 143 with a 142.97. Lots of people are saying, is he going to break the world record? Yeah, maybe he will do that one day, Katie.
Yeah, it's still quite a long way to go, because that is an obscene world record. I think it's 142 dead, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I mean, he currently is looking like the most likely person to do it. I mean, I know we've been talking about him probably for a couple of years, but it does feel like it's been such a rapid ascent to where he is now. If someone had told me a year ago that he'd be the world record holder on 100 free and have broken 143 on 200 free, I think I would have thought that was a bit of a stretch, just because it just doesn't happen at 17. But he just seems to be improving all the time, and having a really good time when he's doing it, which I think is kind of really important. So yeah, it's pretty mind blowing.
And what about his 3:47 in the 400? Now, he had no entry time on that, and he was in the first heat. And we're all going, let's see what he's going to do here. He was under European record pace at 200 in that, and just eased up afterwards. And obviously didn't do the final, but 3:47 for his first international 400 freestyle.
Yeah, it's really impressive. I don't know if you can focus on the 100, the 200, and the 400. Like when you're as good as he is, I don't know if you can excel in all of them sort of to the same extent. But if there's someone who's going to do it, I wouldn't be that surprised if it's him.
Especially with a decent Romanian junior freestyle relay at the moment. I mean, they were in, and he was the lead off for it here. They didn't make the finals, it turned out, but they've obviously got designs on that for Paris. Now, if he has to do relays as well, he certainly can't do 400.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'd sort of, yeah, his I suppose his schedule was probably quite a lot lighter than a lot of the guys who were doing 100, sort of 100 and 200 freestylers, because there were a lot of opportunities for relays this week, and some I think ended up having a really heavy schedule, which wasn't something that he had to look at so much.
All right, I did put a call out on social media earlier asking if anyone had any questions for us, and a number came in, and we'll deal with most of them at the end. But there was one that came in from Jonathan, which is relevant to our conversation now. He asks, if Popovich was going to go 141.9, what's the most feasible way to split it? 49.9 and a 52, or 49.5 and a 52.4? So what he's saying, Katie, and I don't know what your view on this would be, does he go out just a fraction faster than he does currently and bring it back quite a bit faster, or does he go all out for the first 100 and give himself more leeway to drop off at the end?
Obviously, I don't know the answer, but I would say the way that he seems to prefer to swim his races would lend itself more to the going out slightly faster and bring it back ridiculously strong. I don't think we've seen him go for it on the first 50 ever, or the first 100, of a 200. So I think probably the back end focus is going to be where his strength lies, particularly compared to so many others. People are starting to go out quite a lot faster, I think, in the men's 200 free now. They're really sort of pushing the front end. So whether or not he'll be dragged along with them and not be able to push that back end in the same way that he has, I think will be interesting to see. But then, if you look at the women's event, the 200 free, the only way that Titmus has been able to get close to Pellegrini's record is to really push the first 100. So, there's an argument that that's the way to do it. That's the way you've got to do it. And certainly when I've heard people like Ian Thorpe talking about how that record's going to be broken, the school of thought seems to be you just have to go for it. But then I don't think we've come across a back end beast like Popovich quite yet. Could
he even split?
I think that's too big an ask. But I mean, he's got the skills, but I just think, with the start, I think an actual even split. Molly O'Callaghan would tell me that I'm wrong, but I think an actual even split is unlikely.
I think if anyone was going to do it, he could, but I tend to agree that because the suits gave so much advantage at the end, that you've got to get ahead of it and hang on for grim death.
I mean, that last 50 as well from Biederman was ridiculous. So somebody's got to do that, because every time I see that inside the record at 100 and 150, I say, but bear in mind that last 50 went like a rocket. So you got to find that speed over the last 50 somehow.
Yeah, it's like the men's 200 breaststroke world record line now. You think, oh my God, they're under it, and then you remember that Stubblety Cook came back sort of in some unbelievable last 50, and that being close to it at 150 is absolutely no indication whatsoever.
Indeed, it's not. Well, we will keep watching to see whether he can get down to that 141, and perhaps he'll do it next year, or the year after.
Might do it at World Juniors.
Yeah, well, who knows? Maybe in a couple of weeks he'll get another step towards it. But I think that's enough of David Popvici for this podcast, because we want to talk about the Brits, who had a pretty successful week all round in Rome. And top of the pile, Bob, won Ben Proud, who added the European title to his Commonwealth, World long course and World short course titles that he's won this season already. I mean, we're running out of superlatives for him.
We are, but I don't think he's anywhere near respected by people outside the swimming fraternity. I'm seeing BBC Sport going on about Dean Asher-Smith and her cramp, and I'm seeing them talking about Adam Jamili and his problems at the Commonwealth Games. Ben Proud does not get anywhere near the recognition or acknowledgement he should have, and I think part of it is down to his demeanour. It was interesting that he was presented his medal last night by Anthony Irvine. So you've got two complete contrasts there. You've got the showman, the outgoing. Ben is very laid back. He's very focused on what he does. You saw him in the call room before the final, just standing around there, not pumping himself up, not beating his chest. It looked like he just arrived at a club meet, not a European final. And I think therein lies the problem, that to a certain extent we expect 50 freestylers and to say 100 freestylers in the men's to be showmen, to have all that kind of bravado. He's the reverse. He goes against the textbook on that, and I think that's half of the problem, that people, they see Adam Peterson. Obviously, Adam is the best in the world right across the board when he's on full form. But I just think that almost kind of works against him, that because he's not the big breast beating and showman and arms waving, splash in the water when he finishes kind of thing. I don't think people go anywhere near acknowledging what a if that was Usain Bolt, and he's the equivalent of our Usain Bolt in swimming, he'd be getting column inches, he'd be getting loads of stuff. He's not getting any of that.
No, I think he's harshly done by in terms of the coverage he's got. He does his talking in the water rather than on the deck, as you say, Bob. But Katie, we had our hearts and our mouths a little bit this week, because it did look like he was just going to get touched out, but he somehow, extended a really long arm to get the touch at the end.
Yeah, I was pretty. I wasn't nervous before the race because I just think he's looked so great. But it was really, really close towards the end. I think it was just a couple of hundredths, wasn't it, that it came down to. But I just so wanted him to have that perfect summer. I feel like he deserves it. He's he interviews so well. He might not be the loudest, but he seems like a great guy, and everyone on the team seems genuinely so pleased for him. I suppose when you've got a lot of people around you who are doing so many events, it can be difficult to get the same coverage and sort of have the same presence, I suppose, than the people who were doing a load of events and constantly being interviewed following those events. But it's such a competitive event. It relies on everything being perfect, and he just works on that perfection all the time. And this summer it just couldn't have really paid off anymore. I really want to see him get that Olympic medal to go with it.
And I know everybody will talk about the job that James Gibson's doing with him in Turkey, but let's acknowledge what John Rudd did with him when he was down at Plymouth, because his starts are still the best. Reaction times are always the best, pretty much, for him in the 50 free. And I thought it was quite interesting. They had back-to-back victories on the final night from Ben Proud, Ruta Meliotite, both under John Rudd, both with the best starting times. And that has stayed with him all the way through.
They do. They really do stand out with their starts, both of them. I thought particularly in Ruta's semi-final, just like a world apart.
Well, if you're going to swim 50s fast, you've got to have a good start. And Ben, well, if he's not the best in the world, he's right up there. And it's just carried him through this summer. And he just seems very comfortable in his skin. And that's served him well, and well done to him, because not many people win one of those titles, let alone hold all three at the same time. So
I never saw him in warm up once, Steve. He was always in the pool that's at, you know this, Katie, because you were there, the one that's indoors at the back. I never actually saw him train at any stage in the competition pool. He would keep a low profile. He was out of the way. I didn't see James Gibson at any point either, and he just rocks up and does what he does.
I think that's a very sensible plan, Ben. European warm-ups, I can verify, are among the most brutal in the world.
Stay well clear then. I think Ben, mind you, he's a big Eunice, isn't he? So he'd probably be able to look after himself even in one of those. But no, good advice for anyone who goes to European Championships, stay out of the warm-up pool. Okay, let's move on and flip over to the women's team. Freya Anderson had a great week, 6 medals, which was put her third, I think, on the list of multiple medal winners. It did indeed third, with 2 golds, 3 silvers, and a bronze medal. Katie, what did you make of her this week?
Yeah, I don't think I had expected quite this level of success. Not because she's not good enough, not at all that. I just think she's had a really long season. Looked pretty tired, I thought, towards the end of Commonwealth Games, and it must have been hard for people to turn it around so quickly, travel to somewhere, I suppose, where you don't have the home crowd and just pick up where you left off. I think she did her fastest 100 freestyle of the season, which is great. I imagine she was slightly disappointed with where she ended up on the podium in the 200 free, because it did feel like a real chance to take that European Championship. But she had a pretty relentless program, and she performed every single time she hit the water. I thought she was great.
She did have a very big program. She did very well, and she's such a racer, Bob, because even if she's feeling tired, long end of a long season, she was still right in there and giving everything for the team, and chasing people down in relays, and indeed closed out that 4x2 relay that took the gold, and it's great to have her.
And she relishes it. That was a great thing. I chatted to her a couple of times during the course of the week, and it wasn't like, oh my God, I've got another race coming up. She was really buoyed at the prospect, going, right, I'm going to be the anchor leg swimmer on a quartet that could get a medal, could get a gold medal, could certainly be on the podium. So I think if you look at it with the swimmers that she's with, she's almost like the most experienced. Well, she is the most experienced now, so she's kind of looking after her flock in a certain way. And she was very much keen on anchoring those quartets. And although she was obviously tired, and she gave that impression when I was talking to her, she went with that kind of, right, few more swims and I'm done. So I'm just going to give everything. And if I suffer for my heart for a couple of weeks, so be it. That's what I need to do.
Well, great for her. Great for her this week to pick those 6 medals up. Now, she didn't pick up an individual gold, just missed out in the 200, as Katie says, but someone who did pick up an individual gold from the ultimate outside smoking in lane 8. Bob, someone that you took us to task over for the Commonwealth Games, because we didn't think he'd do as well as he did, but he was absolutely brilliant in Rome in that final. James Wilby in the 200 breaststroke. I mean, I didn't see it coming based on his semi-final performance, but he absolutely nailed that final.
Well, all I can say is what I said in the commentary before. I didn't know who the favourite was for that race. So I'm looking down the list, and there wasn't a standout. There wasn't one, oh, that's the person they've got to beat. So I thought, well, you got a lane, James. You're not going to know what's going on in the centre lanes, so go for it. And I thought, he went out very powerfully. He went out much quicker than he normally does. And I thought, is this suicidal? Are you really going to pay for this over the last 50? But he did a brilliant job. I kept thinking they're going to come back to him. They never did. And it was strange on the TV angle. A couple of times I looked at the screen. It looked like they were much closer than they actually were. In real time, looking at the pool, I knew they weren't. But to do 208, anybody's doing 208 when they've done a World Championships, Commonwealth Games, and then a Europeans, I think is an amazing. I could actually put it down as the swim of the week for me, because to do 208 when you've had the racing he's had and the highs and lows he had last year, I think that was absolutely sensational.
And Katie, how much do you think it was that the guys in the middle just couldn't see him, and they didn't know he was there, and they were racing amongst themselves?
Oh, well, I mean, he probably couldn't see them either. So I sort of think that goes two ways. To be honest, I think it was just a brave race. And as Bob said, no huge standout before that. And it was about there were a few events where there were chances. And it was really about the person who just decided to take the chance. I think we saw a kind of similar swim in that women's 200 fly final yesterday with the young girl from Bosnia, I think it was. He just took it out, and I think.
I thought it was suicidal.
James...
I looked at her,
exactly.
And I said in comments, she's not going to keep this going, surely. And she got stronger. I mean, she's 16 years of age. Obviously, the impetuosity of youth. She went in there and go, well, I can do this. And I'm thinking, just wait for that elephant and piano to arrive with 50 to go. And she just got stronger. And again, talk about standout swims. I know we're talking about the Brits mainly, but for me, for a 16-year-old to go in there, gutsy, very gutsy. I'm sure most people, I imagine just about everybody watching around the world thought she's going to die. She's going to die terribly. Yeah. And she didn't.
Well, I probably had a similar feeling on James Wilby's last 50 of like, he cannot possibly hold on to this, surely. And he just did. And, what a year this has been. I know he was, he's had a tough year and he's spoken about it. But just taking chances, making the most of opportunities, and delivering swims that we haven't seen him deliver, for a pretty long time in the 200 certainly. I was really chuffed for him, and he speaks really well. He's interviewed really well, and he's given some great quotes, I think, over the last week.
Well, he deserved that gold medal, certainly. You mentioned young Lana Pudar from Bosnia, who won the 200 fly. A couple of young ladies who were impressed for Great Britain. Katie, your namesake, Katie Shanahan, we've spoken about her before, picked up a silver in the 200 back, and Freya Colbert picked up a bronze in the 400 IM. It's really great for them to get their first GB medals. I mean, Katie won medals at the Commonwealth Games for Scotland, but she's kept it going for the 2 weeks, and they've both now got international medals with the Great Britain Hassel.
And I think it's another one of those things we just talked about taking a chance. When these spaces open up, and I was really, really pleased for both of them, and I think it's exciting to see how Katie's coming through as a backstroker as well as an IMer. She also did a really impressive 200 IM semi-final, a little bit slower in the final, but I mean, dropped a big chunk of time off that 200 IM, the sort of PB that you just don't really see from people who are on senior international teams. So she just seems to be getting more confident. She's I think really benefited from her ISL experience, where she was brilliant earlier in the season, and then I think had a bit of a sort of tough time as we went into the long course season, but has really kind of backed everything up this summer. And Freya just seems to be massively taking everything into her stride, because this is the first we've seen of her at the senior international level this year. She's delivered, consistent 157s on 200 free after having done that for the first time at trials, which I think is really impressive. She's been catapulted onto a number of relays that have got medals, and then to cap it off, I think she would have been disappointed at the Commonwealth Games not to pick up an individual medal, and when she was so close in that 400 IM, but she's come away here and really, really delivered. I don't think we've seen what she can do in the 400 free yet, because I know that was right at the back of the programme, and I think she was pretty tired by then. But I think that'll be interesting to see next season as well.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing that 400 IM time come down. She's now on the 440 range. I can see that coming down quite rapidly, and maybe Hannah's British record under threat before too long.
Yeah, it's a really strong British record, isn't it? So there's a way to go still, but they're both improving all the time. So I think that'll be quite a good rivalry to have, within the UK, because there's been an event where we haven't had kind of front runners for a little while, with Hannah and Amy retiring. So I think that they'll push each other on. Because if they're both up and around podium places, it's going to make them want it more.
Well, we know that Hannah and Amy pushed each other on. They both have said it. So maybe that rivalry, is just what we need, as you say, in that event to keep it moving forwards. Staying with the women's team, Bob, I know someone who's been impressing you all year was impressive again in Rome, and Medley Harris, silver in the 100 back, and another key component of the relays as well. You're still thinking she's impressing you, I guess.
Yeah, and impressed me even more. Now, she was one that did struggle with the outdoor conditions, and I did mention this in commentary about the backstroke. There were a couple of times where she did slightly lose her position coming into the finish. I think it almost not quite did for her in the semi-final, but it meant that she didn't quite finish properly. She managed to correct that, fortunately, for the final, and I think, if anything, she's probably a bit annoyed, maybe a bit disappointed with herself. She didn't win that, because she was finishing like a train, and in one more stroke she would have won that. She was so close to winning the 100 back, and I think she's a massive talent. I think 19, just to turn 20 in a few weeks' time. I think she is going to be enormous for us, and obviously so important for that women's relay as well.
Yeah, I think she's been so impressive again. Another one that's just, come onto the team for the first year, but with massive, massive shoes to fill, with Kathleen Dawson being out and injured. And she's just taken it in her stride. She's performed. She's now got individual international medals at 2 major events. And she's sort of being called up, to be in freestyle relays as well, which is not her focus, absolutely. But, and every single time she performs, I've never seen in fact, I don't think I've seen a single swim from her since Worlds that I've thought, they've all been great.
well, she has been a big find this year for Britain, and she's going to be important moving on. Over the next 2 seasons leading into Paris. Someone who had a rather different week from the rest of the team was Imogen Clark. She was picked late to go to Rome, with people dropping out after Commonwealth Games, and somewhat unfortunately landed and went straight into COVID isolation. Spent the first week in her hotel room. Fortunately, was let out on the day of her heat for the 50 breaststroke, her only event. I mean, maybe she would have swum the 100, who knows? But the only event that she had left to swim. Came out and absolutely nailed it, Katie, straight off the bat.
Yeah, she was brilliant, and brilliant to see her on the podium again. She looked like, what a great way to end a pretty rubbish week for her. Rubbish health-wise, not rubbish performance-wise, obviously. I really wanted her to break that 30-second barrier, and she was so close. And she looked amazing in the semi-final. I sort of couldn't believe that she hadn't touched under 30. But yeah, brilliant. It's such a shame that there are such limited opportunities for 50 stroke swimmers, because I think she just looks so strong, and we just don't have another 50 breaststroker of that caliber at the moment, and the scope for kind of exposure and for her to show what she can do is pretty limited. I think 100 is a bit far for her. She's just so strong.
Could she not adapt that stroke, Katie? Could she not adapt that stroke for 100?
I think she used to do 100 more often, and she's now come down to focus on the 50. And I do think it is difficult to go back up, and it, coming down. And I think she did a lot of work with Zoe Baker, and when she sort of seemed to focus more on the 50. And I know she's, Zoe's now in Australia and they're not working together anymore, but it has worked. It's transformed her into this real sort of, dominant, world-beating 50 breaststroker, and I don't think she can do both.
And she'll never get an Olympic medal, though. To me, that's the ultimate goal, isn't it?
I don't think she. I can't see how she could go 104 on 100 breaststroke. Adapt the stroke, do what you will. I think she is almost too powerful. I just don't think she's ever really had the 100 endurance, and I certainly don't think she's going to go back to it now. But that doesn't mean that she's not an absolutely incredible 50 swimmer. And she seems to be having, I think she's really enjoyed this summer. She looks like she's been having a brilliant time. And I'm so glad that, she's had a bit of exposure and we've been able to see her on a couple of podiums.
I think she's kind of done a bit like Ben Proud. She said, right, well, this is my event. I'm going to do everything I can to be absolutely
he can do it at the Olympics. That's
I know. But, and I guess, I would guess she's got other things going on in her life, which probably means she can't commit to enough training, to be an Olympic 100-meter breaststroker. She's not funded. She swam in the ISL for the last 3 seasons, and we know they've had some financial difficulties. So she's probably supporting herself. She's got other things going on in her life. She can, get that 50 absolutely nailed. And
actually, she's very much like Zoe, actually, isn't she, Katie, in that respect? That Zoe was one of those people they tried to get to do hundreds and tried to get to do relays. Never really worked for her.
Yeah, and I for a lot of reasons, I think it's a shame the ISL isn't happening this year. But I think she's somebody who's, she's got a hell of a lot to give a team in the ISL, because 50s are a bit more valued. But sort of in a normal season, just the way that it is that there's sort of, there are limits as to what she can be asked to do, and therefore I suppose how valuable a swimmer she is seen to British swimming.
And you don't get selected on teams for 50s now, so that's the other problem she's got.
Yeah.
No, exactly. It's a big problem. Even Bill Sweetenham picked Zoe Baker, didn't he, for 50s? So, unfortunately, that those days are gone for the time being, at least. One final bronze medal to mention, and someone, Bob, who found a sort of redemption, if you like, in Rome. Luke Greenbank, who had such a disappointment in Birmingham, but came back and took a gutsy bronze in the 200 backstroke.
Yeah, no, he was kicking himself because, again, I had a chat with him last week, and he was so annoyed. The thing that annoyed him most about his Birmingham performance was letting the crowd down, straight, not letting himself down. Was, he's there in front of 5,000 screaming fans who want him to do really well, and he kind of felt he let them down more than letting himself down in that. So that was a redemption. He looked much happier in Rome after his semi-final, and went into the final with high expectations. I think he wanted to do a bit better than bronze, but back on the horse again. And as you think about it, it's not a bad year for him either. Silver medal of the world, bronze at the Europeans. All right, there was a gap in between, but he is now becoming a regular performer. And of course, he had to do the medley relay at the end because sadly Brodie was not quite on form this time in the 100 backstroke. So it was kind of like old times again. Him leading off the medley relay.
I was quite surprised that he went to Rome, to be honest, because I thought he looked pretty exhausted at the end of Commonwealth Games. And I think was it Luke who hadn't been well shortly before Commonwealth Games? I can't remember. I remember a few people saying I couldn't remember if he'd had COVID or not previously, but I might have made that up. I should probably have fact checked. Sorry, everyone.
Yeah, but, I'm not aware of that. I mean, say the chat I had with him that wasn't raised, but he certainly, his annoyance at Birmingham was not so much about his performance, but the fact he'd let the fans down, which I thought was quite a nice magnanimous way to look at it.
He comes across as a great guy, so it's nice that he's been able to end his season on a bit more of a high. And disappointing as the Commonwealths were for him, it's not been a bad season. 200 back wise for him.
No, he did very well in Budapest, didn't he? So nice to finish with that bronze medal and go off on his break. Feeling a bit happier perhaps.
Before we go into the questions, Steve, can I just mention one name because we might possibly overlook him. I'm sure we won't, but just in case we do, Tom Dean. Thomas said I think before he'd finished, he'd done 32 swims. I think he finished nearer 40 than 30 at the end anyway. So you think about from Worlds to Commonwealths to Europeans, he needed his 40 swims in those three events, and he still managed to put in a shift in that last medley relay. I just think the guy is absolutely humongous in the things that he does.
Yeah, he's been, as Steve calls him, Relay Machine Dean. I suppose this has been the first year where I've realised that the addition of these mixed relays and the sort of pressure that it puts on, particularly 100 people who can do 100 freestyle, and Europeans also 200 freestyle, it makes their workload absolutely enormous. And in a way, it's great. And I've enjoyed watching a lot of the relays. It felt like there were an awful lot of them in Rome. Maybe a bit too many. I'm always delighted when we get a medal, but I don't know how exciting a spectator event the mixed 4x200 free is.
I'm with you. I'm with you because the lane order is always the same. It's apart from that weird thing where we nearly had Sarah Sjöström leading off for Sweden. It's always male, female. There's no change. Whereas there's always a bit of jeopardy in the medley relay. So I'm not sure the 4x2 mixed works, whereas the medley does.
Yeah, and I just think I don't know how many 100 freestyles and 200 freestyles Tom Dean potentially could have done. I know he didn't have such a focus on the individuals, but if he'd done all of the possible ones, I just don't think he'd have never left the pool.
And Matt Richards too, to be honest. I mean, Matt's done a lot of swimming. Potentially, if he hadn't done if he obviously pulled out of the 200, he could have made the final of the 200 as well. So he would have had 3 more swims.
Yeah, well, I mean, it certainly adds to the workload, and it was interesting to see some teams, mixing it up a little bit more in their mixed teams than perhaps picking their 4 top people on paper for those races. But it's important on that basis that Britain has more people who can step in, do heats or step into finals if people are off. And someone who stepped up, I thought, pretty well in the relays was Ed Mildred, who got given the task of anchoring the 4x1 and held on for a great bronze medal, and then did the fly in the medley relay. That didn't work out to be a medal in the end, but he still did a really solid job. And nice for him, Bob, to he swam heats for the relays at Commonwealth. Nice for him to get those couple of final swims as well.
Yeah, and also to have that responsibility of having the anchor leg as well, because when I saw that quartet, I'm thinking, really? Tom Dean's not on the anchor leg? And it was basically a bit of strategy on behalf of the team out here to say, okay, show us what you got, right? We want to rely on you. We want to give you a little bit of wriggle room here. We're not going to judge you on this, but we want to see what you can do. So we're going to put Tom on leg 3. I'm going to put you on leg 4. You bring it home. And I thought it was very interesting, a little bit of strategy there. I think it was Dave McNulty's call on that. And I thought, interesting bit of psychology there. Really to build the swimmer up and say, right, we believe in you, go and do it.
Yeah, he was really good. I mean, he certainly didn't let anybody down, and that he'll be much better for that experience. Right, we mentioned we've got some questions coming. There's a couple which are relevant to the conversation we've just been having about relays. Jonathan, different Jonathan from before, but he's asked on our general opinion on targeting relays over individual swims. Now, a bit different this time because I know that, or we now know that that British Swimming went to Rome with the intent of letting people only swim relays and maybe one or two individuals. So we saw Tom do the 100 free and then relays. We saw Anna Hopkin do the 50 free and then relays. And people were dropping out of individuals all through the week. What do we feel about that, Katie?
I thought it was a little bit weird. I mean, I sort of think because this was an optional event for people, and a lot of people elected, I think, between Commonwealths and Europeans, sort of not to actually go to the Europeans, having originally said they'd like to compete. It just felt a little bit like you've kind of got 1 foot in and 1 foot out, and I would have expected the approach to be, well, if we're going to go, we're going to go and we're going to commit, rather than we're going to sort of pick and choose a bit. I also thought, and I have no idea why this was, it might just be a timing thing. It seemed like we were doing quite a lot of leaving empty lanes rather than kind of withdrawing in good time and getting our names taken off the start list, which I always think looks a bit, it doesn't give the greatest impression just when there's an empty lane or a load of empty lanes in a heat. So like I can understand it. I get that everyone's exhausted, and that it's been a really long year and a weird year. But I just thought it was a little bit of a strange approach.
Bobbit, anything to add?
I'm with Katie totally, and my mind goes back to the Olympics and James Guy in the 100 fly, for example, where he's worked for, as it turned out, 5 years towards his individual event, his main individual event, and suddenly gets yanked out of the lineup. And I'm thinking, but you've worked for 5 years for your individual event to have yourself centre stage at the Olympics, and then be told, actually, can you do the gallant thing and fall on your sword for the relays? And I feel uncomfortable about that, and I said so at the time.
And Bob, did you get a sense of that there was yanking this time round rather than it being people's choice? Because, I was quite surprised, like Freya Colbert doing the 400 on the last day. I just assumed that everyone would probably leave the individuals on the last day unless they were kind of nailed on medal chance, but that made me think, oh, actually maybe it's kind of up to the swimmers about whether or not they want to swim.
Yeah, I think initially it was. It's kind of, how do you feel? Do you want to do it? I think with the Tom Dean situation, obviously they thought there's a gold to be had in the 4x2, so we'll put all our eggs in that basket, because the way that obviously give Tom 3 more swims in addition to what he's got, and he really would be running on empty. And so with Matt Richards for that matter. So I kind of got that one. The 4x2 made a lot of sense. But there were examples during the week I'm thinking, certainly with the younger swimmers, I'm thinking, well, I think they could probably cope with it, to be honest. But from what I gather, it was mainly management, but I'm sure in consultation with the swimmers.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I mean, I think they perhaps could have communicated what British Swimming, could have communicated a bit better what the aim for the meet was, because we all thought, oh yeah, here we go, Tom's going to have a go at Popovich in the 200, whatever, and of course that didn't eventuate. But it was so late that we kind of realised that was what was going on. So maybe there's a communication piece there as much as anything. But it does relate to the next question we've got from Ollie, who asked us if we thought it was too much to ask for the swimmers to go to 3 meets, and should there have been more of a duty of care to prevent them burning out. Now, I'm going to throw one thing in here and say, well, the Europeans were optional, as we know, and we know a lot of people didn't go. I think people like Abby Wood, Molly Renshaw, Duncan Scott, Adam, we know, changed his mind quite understandably. So there was that option for people not to go. But Katie, thoughts on that sort of duty of care to stop people burning themselves out?
I think we've just got to trust that people will work with their coaches to know what's best for them. These are people who kind of know what they're doing and know what they can cope with, and know how their bodies are feeling towards the end of the season. It sounds like, based on the number of people who did decide not to go to Rome or went to Rome with a very light schedule, like they, that we really did kind of try and take care of people in that sense. I don't know. I don't know how easy it would have been for someone like Tom Dean or Freya Anderson, who we relied on so heavily for relays, to say, actually, I don't want to go, if relay focus was always going to be, the way that it was in this particular event. But they seem to be fine and having a great time. It is really heavy. It's been a really tough end to the year. But yeah, I think it's just, it didn't seem like anyone had been dragged there. So I think we've just got to trust that everyone made the right decision for themselves.
And do you know what the big attraction was for quite a few of the swimmers? That pool, swimming in that pool, was actually quite a big lure. For those who hadn't done it or had done it at junior level, a lot of people wanted to go back there just to experience that.
It is a great pool. Yeah,
and you don't get a lot of outdoor international competition anymore, with FINA having decided they're not going to do World Champs outdoors. So, great experience, I'm sure, from that point of view as well. Right, there's 3 kind of quick-fire or more quick-fire type questions left to go before we wrap things up. Not specifically relevant to this week, but we are at the end of the season, so worth throwing these in. So firstly, from Kat, favourite relay performance of the year? Katie?
God, I can't remember any. I genuinely can't. There have been so many, particularly, we've had about 27 in Rome alone. I can't even remember our results anywhere, so somebody's going to have to help me out.
I know what mine was. Anchor leg for Tom Dean in the 4x1 in Birmingham. Absolutely. No doubt about it.
Which 4x1? Remind me.
The medley relay.
Men's medley.
Right, the medley relay. Yeah, where we touched out Australia by
right, fine. I'm with Bob.
amount. Yeah.
Agreed.
Well, that would have been my pick as well, I have to say. There were a couple in Budapest when Tom split 46s, which were crazy, which were very good as well. But no, I'm with you. 4x1 medley head-to-head with Carl Chalmers in Birmingham. Definitely my favourite. Next to best or most up-and-coming British swimmer. That's from Hannah. Bob?
Maddie Harris.
Yeah, I thought you might pick her. Katie?
Yeah, I'd probably go for Maddie. I am intrigued at how much time someone like Katie Shanahan's dropped recently. I think Maddie's standard is higher at the moment, but I'm sort of quite excited about seeing a bit more of that come off some of Katie's best times and where she can get to.
Yeah, I think I would have flip-flopped between those two and then failed to make a decision. So I think that's a good point to move on. Right, last question also from Hannah. The next world record I think is going to fall. It's not Hannah Miley, no. It's different Hannah. I think next world record fall. I'm going to go first here because I have a feeling the next world record we will see, or obviously probably next year now in terms of long course competition, women's 50 metres breaststroke. Ruth was very close in Rome in her semi-final, but it just feels like it's in relative terms it's a soft one. When you look at the FINA points, which are all related to the world record in each event, it scores really highly, which implies there's lots of people right up against it. I think 5 of the top 14 swims in Rome all came in the women's 50 breaststroke in the women's events. So that's my call for when the next one's going to come from. Katie?
I think that's a good call. The thing is, though, you look at something like Commonwealth Games, and we were pretty, the winning time was pretty far off, and same with Worlds was pretty far off. Route to getting that close was, that was brilliant. But sometimes people just seem to miss that by a mile. I think the ones that are exposed are women's 50 back as well, which people just seem to be circling around all the time. But to be honest, I now think we're going to see some serious moves in the men's 100 free. I think now someone's done it. There are a lot of hungry people now. We don't know what's going on with Caleb Dressel, whether he's still, we're going to see him at the level we've seen him, if we're going to see him again. There seems to be quite a lot of chat around that. But I think Kyle Chalmers' list looked really good, and Popovich is obviously now leading the way. But I think it's one of those things where now someone's done it, it's just going to keep falling. And he's just chipped away at it. I don't think it's out of reach for a lot of people. Obviously, men's 200 breast might go again.
Yeah, it could do. I'm going to go with Milax 100 fly.
Oh, yeah, good one.
The 100 was that, Bob?
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's taking the 200 down so much. I think that's hard to do, but I think the 100's in his range.
I think he's got his eye on that 149 though, hasn't he? And he I haven't seen him look pleased for so long. He seems like he has the highest standards for himself, and I don't think we'll see him look pleased until he goes 149.
No, I think the point at which he goes 149 will probably see Andy Jameson spontaneously combust in the commentary box, because it would be bonkers, wouldn't it? 149, 200 fly, absolutely amazing. But there we go. So that's all the questions that we've got time for. Thank you guys for sending those in. Time to wrap this up for this season. Any final thoughts on this very unusual summer, Bob?
I think we'll never have a summer like it again, and I think all the swimmers appreciate that. They're going to look at next year's calendar and go, I've only got Worlds to worry about. So, those who've come through those 3 meets, and Tom Dean being a good case, and obviously Matt Richards, people like that, I take my hat off, because that is exertion to the very point of exhaustion. And I think that those who came through relatively unscathed are superhuman.
Katie, any final thoughts?
Yeah, agreed. I hope everyone has a really nice holiday now. And my final slightly grumpy thought is that I really enjoyed the pace of the finals at Europeans, particularly in the wake of the Commonwealth Games. Very slow-paced finals, not as in the pace of the swimming, as in the pace of progressing through the final sessions.
Yeah, and I think my final takeaway for this season is that more meets should have dogs at their medal ceremonies.
Oh, so, yes, I do agree with that. Although I did feel a bit sorry for the dogs, because it must have been boiling.
It was boiling. You've got a massive shaggy coat in 34-degree heat. They didn't look happy. They weren't giving them any water, as far as I could see.
I'm sure they were looking after them behind the scenes, we hope. Anyway, right, time to call it quits. Bob, Katie, thank you ever so much for your thoughts across a very long and arduous season.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't know when we'll be back. There's no, funnily enough, there isn't another meet in 2 weeks' time that we'll be talking about, which is something of a strange feeling. But there may be some things that pop up in the autumn. Best way to find out about those will be to keep an eye on social media, at Pullbuoy on Twitter or at Pullbuoy UK on Instagram. It's been a great season. We've really enjoyed talking about such a lot of international swimming. So if you've been with us all the way through, thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the Pullbuoy podcast. For more episodes, visit www.pullbuoy.co.uk/podcast.